Welcome back to the shop. In this video, I'm going to show you how I built this workbench. And this is a special workbench because it's built for a combat wounded veteran that graduated from Rob Cosman's Training the Hand workshop through his Purple Heart project. Now, I'm going to leave a link below to the Purple Heart project, and it's a fantastic organization that is completely donation driven. And what it does is teaches combat wounded veterans the joy of hand tool woodworking. It introduces them to the craft and builds their skills, and I just can't say enough about it, especially being a veteran myself, and I work for the VA, so the mission's fantastic. I encourage you to check the link out and enjoy the build. Thanks.
The first thing I needed to do is break down all the Baltic birch plywood for the project, and instead of taking a big heavy couple of sheets of 3/4 inch Baltic birch down to my shop, I decided to just bring up my track saw and break it down into the garage, and then I brought everything down to the shop. And special thanks to Zern Building Products and Design Center for donating all the lumber for this project. That was fantastic of them, and I can't thank them enough. I will link to Zern's down below in the description. Next thing I needed to do was cut the pieces of Baltic birch to length to create the base of the workbench. Once everything was cut to length, I had to create a jig so I could laminate the pieces together to create two leg assemblies. That's what I'm doing here. So as you can see, these are interlocking pieces of 3/4 inch Baltic birch that I glue and use 1-inch narrow crown staples to put together. The staples act as a clamp, and I've got to be careful to put the staples in areas where I'm not going to be drilling through them or sawing through them as I put the other components together. Next are the stretchers. There's 4 of those, 2 top, 2 bottom. 2 bottom stretchers are going to be rabbeted to accept a shelf in the bottom. And same situation here, just laminating with tight bond wood glue and using the 1-inch narrow crown staples. Once everything's laminated together and glue is dry, I come and square things up on the chop saw and get to working on the top. Now for the top, I'm using 4 pieces of 3/4 inch MDF. It's roughly 20 inches by 60 inches each piece, and I'm laying out a grid here to use screws to act as clamps. I glue everything up and then use the screws to clamp it all together. And I repeat this 3 times to get a 3-inch worktop. While the last piece of the top is drying, I go ahead and round over the base of the leg assembly on the bandsaw. Next step in the process is putting some roundovers on the leg assemblies. Here I'm drilling some holes with the drill press to accept the hardware that's going to connect the leg assemblies to the stretchers. Stretchers are going to have 4 holes each drilled in them, 2 on the ends, 1 on each end, and a larger hole on the inside of each stretcher at the end of this hole that I'm drilling right here. Next up on the drill press is a 1.5 inch Forstner bit that goes almost through to the other side of the stretcher, and this hole is to be able to put a washer and nut on the end of that bolt that ties the stretcher into the leg assembly. And another round over. Just want to make sure that everything's smooth, easy to assemble. Next up is cutting the rabbets for the bottom shelf, and for that I just did a 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch rabbet on the table saw, and if I had it to do over again, which I probably will in short order, hopefully, I would not put the staples so close to the edge because I had to turn the saw stop safety feature off in order to do that correctly. Then here I am cutting the shelf, the phenolic laminated shelf. It's about a 3/4 inch piece of plywood with some plastic laminate over it, and I'm putting the tape on here so that it doesn't chip out. I do have a pretty sharp saw blade, but I just don't want to take any chances. And so here I am cutting it to length and width. So now it's assembly time. I am drilling 4 holes to put some lag bolts through the base into the top from the bottom. Just, you know, simple assembly here, nothing fancy. Now the plans don't call for this, but I wanted to put some nice edge banding around the top of the bench, and I'm using 3/4 inch honey locust. And honey locust is native to Wisconsin, and it's such a beautiful wood when it's finished. It's just gorgeous, and I thought it would make a nice touch. Now I will say that I use 45-degree angles on the corners. I toyed with the idea of doing dovetails, but I really wanted to get this thing done, and I didn't have a lot of honey locust to waste in case I goofed it up, because I'm not that great at dovetails. So I did the 45-degree corners, but it still came out pretty nice. And if I'm being honest, I am not that good at doing dovetails, so eventually I do want to take one of Rob Cosman's classes and learn the technique. And as with the rest of the bench, I rounded over the edges on the edge banding to make it nice and smooth. Now for the dog holes, I initially used a Forstner bit to start the holes, and they're 3/4 inch dog holes, and then I used this 3/4 inch bit to go the rest of the way through. As you notice on the bottom side, I have a piece of plywood that I used to prevent blowout, and after that I just used a little round over bit to soften the edges of the dog holes. Once the dog holes are complete, I use some CA glue to stiffen up the sides of the dog holes, the walls of the dog holes. This helps because the top is made out of MDF, and so the CA glue hardens the interior walls of the dog holes so they don't deteriorate over time. The next step is installation of the Solberg's vise. This is a vise that was sent to me by the Purple Heart Project. It's about 350 bucks, I think, something like that. And it's a really good basic vise that is very easy to install. There are a few things you have to do to get the base ready for installation, like you got to chisel out a few slots here and there, but it's really easy to install. Next up was installation of the casters. It was very simple. I used this template to locate the screw holes and just drilled some pilot holes and put the hardware on, and off we go. It's really nice to have casters on a workbench so you can move it around, you know, in your shop as you need to. Once the casters were done, I did install a little tool rack. That is a little slotted area there that you see that can accept hand saws and chisels. So enjoy these final pictures, and thanks for watching. And please support Rob Cosman's Purple Heart Project. It's in the link below. Thank you.